providers in the room. Your redeemers in the room. Your champions in the room. He's in this room. So what will you do? Jesus Christ, the King above all kings. Jesus Christ, the King above all kings.
Good morning, C3. How we doing? Good. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. If you are new here, we do this thing called Super Bowl Sunday, where after church, we have 3,000 different soups. They all get judged. I think we have pepperoni balls, and then we have ice cream sundaes. So you're here on a good day. Are you an Eagles fan today, though? Okay. So I'm going to a new church. That's fine. That's fine. Because I am also a Taylor Swift fan. So even if the Eagles lose, I still win. Yeah? Stand on up, turn around, meet somebody new, make a new friend, and we'll get worship going. Alexander, reminder to turn those tracks and click on for me. Tell you, wish I could describe it. I can contain it, can't keep it to myself. There aren't enough colors to paint the whole picture. Not enough words to ever say what I found. Wonderful and beautiful and glorious and holy. He is merciful and powerful. Who are we talking about? That's my King. We declare the glory. Give him all the honor. Altogether worthy. Who are we talking about? That's my King. There's no one before you. Yes, we will adore you. All of this is for you. Who are we talking about? That's my King. Oh, I'm not letting the rocks cry without joining the chorus. Not enough notes to make the harmony. It's the song of the ages. You're all of the ages. And all of earth and heaven's symphony. Wonderful and beautiful and glorious and holy. He is merciful and powerful. Who are we talking about? That's my King. We declare the glory. Give him all the honor. Altogether worthy. Who are we talking about? That's my King. There's no one before you. Yes, we will adore you. That's my God. That's my shepherd, my protector. That's my king. That's my rock. That's my anchor, my defender. That's my king. That's my rod. That's my shepherd, my protector. That's my king. That's my rock. That's my anchor, my defender. We declare the glory, give him all the honor. Altogether worthy, who are we talking about? That's my king. We declare the glory, give him all the honor. Altogether worthy, who are we talking about? That's my king. There's no one before you. Yes, we will adore you. All of this is for you. Who are we talking about? That's my king. 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 Let him turn it in your favor. Watch him work it for your good. He's not done with what he started. And he's not done until it's good. Hello, peace. Hello, joy. Hello, love. Hello, strength. Hello, hope. It's a new horizon. Hello, peace. Hello, joy. Hello, love. Hello, strength. Hello, hope. It's a new horizon. did I start to forget all of the great things you did? When did I throw away faith for the impossible? How did I start to believe you weren't sufficient for me? Why do I talk myself out of seeing miracles? You are more than able. 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 Who am I to deny what the Lord can do? It's easy for you. Now I see all that I have. I've got my confidence back. I put my trust in the one who still does miracles. You do miracles. You are more than able. 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 Who am I to deny what the Lord can do? Can you imagine, with all of the faith in the room, what the Lord can do? What the Lord can do? And it's gonna happen. Just let the way make it through. He's gonna move. He's gonna move. Can you imagine, with all of the faith in the room, what the Lord can do? What the Lord can do? And it's gonna happen. Just let the way make it through. He's gonna move. He's gonna move. Can you imagine, with all of the faith in the room, what the Lord can do? The Lord can do. And it's gonna happen. Just let the way make it through. He's gonna move. He's gonna move. 'Cause anything is possible. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. Who am I to deny what the Lord can do? Anything is possible. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. Who am I to deny what the Lord can do? Who am I to deny what the Lord can do? Who am I to deny what the Lord can do? Sing this out. You are more than able. You are more than able. You are more than able. how you work. There's so much goodness and grace, and much more than I deserve, 'cause I know who I am. I can't stay where I'm at, and we've come this far by faith, and I just can't turn back. He's not done with me yet. He's not done with me yet. And there's so much more to the story. And you're not done with me yet. You're not done with me yet. You're not done with me yet. And there's so much more to the story. And you're not done with me yet. You're not done with me yet. You're not done with me yet. There's so much more to the story. And you're not done with me yet. Who am I to deny what the Lord can do? Who am I to deny what the Lord can do?
One thing that I love that this church does is every week we have a chance to come together and we get to ask the question, what can the Lord do? One thing I really loved about that song is that it highlights and it expresses this constant challenge that we have and that we feel, where we feel like we have problems that are too big or insurmountable for God to handle, or problems that we have a hard time letting go of. And inside of this moment, we get to come forward and we get to bring our requests before God. So at this time, I'd like to invite anybody who has a prayer request or something that they would like to have prayed for, come forward right now and receive prayer.
to your heart. Lead me to your heart. Lead me to your heart. Lead me to the cross.
It's at this time I'd like to invite the ushers to come forward. We're going to go ahead and receive the offering. The offering is a chance for us to go ahead and participate in God's plan. Ultimately, what it boils down to is submission. God gives us these resources. God gives us these funds to go ahead and manage. And inside of every week, we have a chance to go ahead and give back to God what he has given to us. And by that, we have the chance to go ahead and let loose God's plan onto the earth. So dear God, just go ahead and bless this offering, God. Turn it into what you want it to be, God. Let it flow out into the streets. Let it change our neighborhoods, our communities, our cities, and our homes, God. Just go ahead and bless this and bless the givers. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Thank you. The worship band, by the way, terrific job, right? Incredible. Though I am unfortunately going to need help. I need this into something, or else I'm going to be distracted the whole time. Nobody wants that. So, hi everybody, welcome to C3. It is so nice to see you guys all here today. First off, I am so thrilled because today is a day that we talk about for so much of the year. And this is the moment, really, that so much hope is pinned on. It's our soup competition, and let me tell you, folks, the competition is fierce so far. First off, we have some real beautiful ringers here, right? We've got the creamy hot Hungarian mushroom soup. I have no idea what that means, but I can't wait to find out, right? This is thrilling. Somebody is making the chili cheese dog soup, which I don't know what that means, but gosh dang, I'm excited to find out. Come on, folks. And then, poor Dylan Sweat, his mom told me the soup and I forgot it, so then I just had to write it in my notes as mushroom something soup, but they assure me it's delicious. And then also, I'm so excited to go ahead and announce what my soup is this morning. We've been tinkering. I tinkered last night. I was really crafting and working hard. The judge that's inside of the back needs to go ahead and close their ears at this point. They can't know. Thank you. Maybe go la 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 la. Anyway, at this point, it's the peanut butter and jelly ramen soup. Very excited about that one, folks. And before you judge it, y'all are judging it. Before you judge it, just know I actually tasted it and I enjoyed it. So whatever judgment you're about to bring, you're going ahead and bringing to my own ability to taste, okay? So just don't knock it till you try it. So also, I just want to state that something else that we have coming up that I'm really excited about. We've been doing cabin fevers every Friday with our youth group. And we get to, basically, I tell the youth group and I give them each like one night that they get to go ahead and plan a whole youth group night of ministry. They write the lesson, they pick a song, they do games and everything. So far, they have all blown me out of the water with just how good that they can do. I did want to go ahead and call out Devin Kinley and Alex specifically because they did a great job on that one. That was a good job on that, folks. And nothing is more personally gratifying to me than seeing youth group kids being able to teach a night, right? Like that is like the most personally gratifying thing to me because it's inside of that moment I get to see how much they have learned, right? And it's terrific to watch and see. Also, youth group nights are always interesting, right? Youth group is messy, and that's why I like it, right? Youth group is not a clean, confined space. Youth group is a messy space, and everybody understands that. Thank you to the men's Bible study for patching the hole in the wall inside of the cafe after a child broke the wall with a pair of Crocs. He slipped. It was not deliberate, he assures me. But anyway, nearly broke his ribs. It was a great time. But like, youth group can be an experience that has extreme highs and extreme lows inside of it, right? So, for example, you could be doing a youth group night of ministry and you could be watching students give a lesson, which is extraordinarily gratifying to watch, right? You could be seeing kids like genuinely engaging in worship. You can have to pause the game of Super Smash Brothers that you were playing because somebody is vomiting a waterfall because they chugged most of a thing of grape juice and then proceeded to take large shots of Mountain Dew until their stomach could not contain it anymore, and then vomited, and my wife comes running up to me and she's like, "Someone's vomiting blood." And I was like, okay, well, this is a vibe. No, it's just grape juice. It was just grape juice. And then also, all in the same night, you can have students breaking down and sobbing because they're going home and they're finding their parents guardians having a terrific fight. It's all in the same night together that you can have all of these highs and all of these lows together. And that's what really makes youth group so special, is that you can have these highs and these lows all shared inside of this moment. And the only other place I've ever seen that happen is with family, right? Because family is the one place where you're really bound together, where you're really forced to stay together no matter what the surrounding circumstances are. You can't just turn your back on your uncle because you don't like spending time with your uncle. You're forced to spend time together, right? Family is something where you're forced to be together. So we've been inside of a book series inside of the book of Galatians. It's been so far very gratifying. I'm also here to say that if Greg has said it, we are very close to the end of the book of Galatians. I'm very excited for what he is doing next. He has a clear vision for it, and he keeps hyping us up to read the book, which I keep getting distracted midway through, but hey, that's okay. We're moving on to something very exciting, but we're finishing up the book of Galatians, and the book of Galatians is an epistle, right? And an epistle is a letter that was written from an apostle to a church or sometimes an area, which is why the book of Galatians is so interesting, because it wasn't written to a particular church, it was written to a whole area of churches. Inside of the youth group, I use the comparison of saying it would be like if I wrote a letter and I said that it was supposed to go to the entirety of the churches in Pennsylvania, a broad audience, right? And the reason that Paul is having to write this letter is because Paul is finding out that somebody has brought in a false gospel. See, Paul went ahead and he set up some of those churches. Paul sweat to go ahead and get these people to know Jesus. And now he's finding out that his good work that he has been doing is being polluted by people bringing in a false truth. So the book of Galatians is kind of divided into three parts, right? The first two chapters are all about defining what the gospel is because people have been trying to misidentify it. The second part, which is the next two chapters, has been defending the gospel from these critics and defending his work against those who would like to minimize it. And finally, in the part that we are in currently, we're in the applying of all of that information, right? We get to go ahead and we get to take all of what we have been learning so far and we get to learn how we're supposed to apply it to our lives. And last week, we specifically asked the question, which is, are you living in the freedom that Christ gave you? Now, some of you are worried. You're looking at your sermon notes right now, and it's like, was Joshua just unaware that Greg covered some of those verses? I know. I'm using it to go ahead and build into my point this week, but we are recovering some old ground, right? So really the question that we're answering today, and it's your first, well, not your first fill in the blank, but the first fill in the blank that is in a review section, is what are we free to do? Last week we learned that we have freedom, but really this week we're going to go ahead and drill into the question, what do we have the liberty to do now that we know that we have liberty? So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Galatians 5, 3 through 4, it reads this, "Again, I testify to every man who gets himself circumcised that he is obligated to do the entirety of the law. You who are trying to be justified by the law are alienated from Christ. You have fallen from grace." See, this morning, we're going to go ahead and start looking at Paul's strong warning. That's the next one. And the reason that we're going ahead and we're looking at Paul's warning here is that this is really strong language. You rarely see this inside of the New Testament, where somebody is using such explicit language to say, if you continue going down this line, you will be alienated from God. So what specifically was happening that Paul felt like he had to give this warning? Well, we're going back and we're just talking about this false gospel that was being spread, right? Now, see, the circumcision might be a bit confusing here for some of you. But see, the thing is that circumcision, right, it was the marker of a Jew from a Gentile, right? It was the sign of the messianic promise that God had made. It was the sign that God had given Abraham to go ahead and mark that he was in a covenant with God. This was a really important marker to the Jews because it made a Jew a Jew. To get circumcised, it was the equivalent of just, it was your declaration of who or where you belong to. And the reason that Paul is so adamant about this is that Paul is warning that there is no partial payment of grace. There is no partial payment of grace, right? Because here's the thing. When Jesus went ahead and he died on the cross, when Jesus went ahead and he paid for our sin, there is no Jesus pays 80% of it, or Jesus covered all of the sin that you had up until that moment, and then you have to take care of the rest of it. If you had to take care of the rest of it, we'd all be in a bad situation. Right? If you had to take care of the rest of it, that would mean that you would have to live a perfectly holy life for the rest of your life, or else you would have to keep doing the sacrifices and you'd have to keep doing all the things to atone for sin that they used to do. And what Paul is saying is, by trying to sign on to being a Jew, by trying to get circumcised, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make yourself more worthy of God. And if you're trying to make yourself more worthy of God, what you're doing is you're trying to work to earn salvation. And if you're trying to work to earn salvation, what you're going to find is that you have to pay the rest of the cost. Because either Jesus is enough or he is nothing. There's no in between. So really the question is, why was this coming up? Why was there so much conflict inside of the church? And why was everybody trying to go back and trying to force the circumcision on everybody? And what it fundamentally boils down to is an identity crisis. That's the next one. Identity crisis. See, the thing is that when the Galatians converted, they were predominantly a pagan area, right? And because they went from being pagans to Christians, that meant a whole amount of stuff, right? So it's a little different than how we would think of it inside of today's terms, right? Inside of today's terms, you go from being an atheist to being a Christian, and that means, I don't know, maybe you show up to church on Sunday, right? That's generally the sacrifice that you pay if you're going from a different religion to Christianity. Back in the day, religion was like everybody's whole lifestyle, was everybody's whole culture. Everything was built around their religions, and particularly inside of the Roman society, right? Because the Roman society, they were a pantheon, right? So they had just a multitude of gods, and there was no reason that you couldn't worship a multitude of gods all at the same time, right? In fact, it's such to the point that Caesar, you literally had to make a sacrifice to Caesar every year to remain a Roman citizen, right? So the idea is that you made lots of small sacrifices, you didn't tie your allegiances too close to any particular god, and you just, in general, it was just an atmosphere of everybody trying and sampling a little bit of gods here and a little bit of gods there. But see, the thing was, when people were going from being pagans to Christians, they had to stop doing all of that. It was a complete change over from their culture, right? So when their conversion had essentially cost them their society that they had lived in, their conversion had cost them their society. It had cost them everything that they knew, everything that they were familiar with. And just imagine for a second that you were inside of their shoes. Imagine how alienated you would feel every single day. All of your friends are going out and they're going to the temple to go ahead and eat food that was sacrificed to like Poseidon, right? And inside of that moment, you could not go ahead and join with that because that was food that was declared for another god. And you had to honor Jesus first. Or, you and your wife were having trouble getting pregnant, so you would have to go to the fertility temple to go ahead and ask the gods for the ability to have children. And inside of that moment, you couldn't do that anymore, so you just have to not engage in any part of that system. Also, it was just, they were immediately ostracized for that. Listen to what it says from this commentary. Becoming a Christian involved the disruption of the whole pattern of one's life, including business relationships, social connections, civic loyalties. Christians were frequently regarded as anarchists because they would not pay tribute to local urban deities. Into this situation of loss and social dislocation came the Judaizers, offering a gospel of circumcision that would at least put the Gentile Christian on social par with the adherents to the synagogue. By assuming the status of the proselyte, then the Galatians would hopefully be able to identify themselves with the local synagogues and thus hold at least themselves more understandable and more recognizable in a place inside of society. They were lost and they didn't know where they fit into the picture. And the Judaizers come in and they say, all you have to do is get this one mild surgery. Yikes. All you have to do is get this one mild surgery, and then you can join this whole group, right? Everybody inside of this community can't wait to have you, right? There's just a lot of rules that you have to follow, and there's a lot of stuff that you have to follow. You can worship Jesus at the same time, though. Jesus was a Jew after all, right? And what Paul is saying here is that this is so incredibly dangerous. But also, inside of that same moment, there is another problem that is coming up here, which is that the Jews don't know what to do with the Gentiles. The Christian Jews don't know what to do with these Gentiles because the thing is their entire cultural heritage is about separating themselves from the rest of society. That is the reason that God gave them the 613 Mosaic laws, was so that they could be separate from the rest of society, so that they could be holy, right? The true understanding of holy is that it is set apart, right? It's like the fancy silverware that you only use at the big social gatherings. It's the fine china plates that you only use when you have a guest of honor, right? It's the things that are set apart for a special purpose. That is what it remains for something to be holy. If you use something that is holy for a mundane thing, it's no longer separated for a special purpose. And see, the thing is that the Jews, their whole cultural history had been built off of the idea that God had called them apart to be separate. Now, all of a sudden, they're a part of a religious movement where the things that they were separated from are now joining them, and they're supposed to welcome them as equal partners. See, The Gentiles didn't feel like they fit in anywhere. They didn't fit in with the rest of their pagan fellows and friends and family. And they didn't fit in with the Jews. And this is where this quest for the circumcision and this trying to make this hybrid work. So what's Paul's problem here inside of this particular passage? What's Paul's problem? Well, see, the thing is, if this is left unaddressed, what does Paul say? Paul says that this could jeopardize their whole faith. It could jeopardize their whole religious future. It could jeopardize their relationship with Christ. And really, the core problem here is this, right? Their identity was in God alone. That's the next blank. Their identity was in God alone. See, it didn't matter how or who they wanted to define themselves as, they were called out and separated themselves. They were called out from their pagan communities that they were a part of, and the Jews were called out from the Jewish society that they were a part of. They were both together something new. And since they are in Jesus, they are bound by the same covenantal blood of the new covenant. And they together are supposed to be each other's new family, each other's new community, each other's new society. They were supposed to be there for each other. And the thing is, the other part of the problem is that it nullifies their faith. That's the next fill in the blank there. Because the thing is that if they could go ahead and do some things to earn more of God's favor, that means that they have God's favor plus God's favor, which meant that they had more than their neighbors, which meant that they were therefore in a better spot than everybody else, and which meant that they were not necessarily the same or equal as everybody else inside of their community. The thing is that if you try to earn God's favor, you have to earn all of God's favor. And giving you rules and things to work towards allowed you to go ahead and measure your performance and see how good of a Christian you were. Well, I prayed today. I did my morning devotionals. And then I went ahead and I went on Facebook and I commented on somebody's vaguely atheistic post. And I replied with a message of hope and grace. So that gives me plus 30 Christian points, which I'm going to go ahead and cash in for a new Ferrari, right? Because that's the idea of what it essentially boils down to. Eventually, inside of this point, it's you're doing things to earn God's favor. And it becomes works instead of faith. And this fundamentally becomes a problem. If you don't need to have faith, you won't have faith. If you don't need to constantly use faith, stretch yourself out in faith, you'll lose that muscle. And when it comes time for you to rely on faith, it won't be there for you. I'm going to go ahead and read from a book, right? This book, it's meant a lot to me. It's been a really helpful book in kind of understanding Christianity. It's called The Imperfect Disciple by Jared Wilson. And here's the thing. I'm going to introduce a concept because we've been working through this concept inside of the youth group. The concept is this. If you cannot behave, it is better to, youth group? Behold, right? If you cannot behave, it's better to behold. Let's explain this thought. You want a heart as big as the sky? Behold the sky. You want a soul as bright as the day? Behold the day. Or alternatively, if you want a shriveled heart panting for satisfaction, just keep staring at the ceaseless parade of detritus and our short-circuited culture on your closest screen. Or simply maintain your vision on the ultimately inconsequential Jesus so fashionable in the world and in worldly churches. What it all boils down to is this. We have fundamentally a worship problem. And so long as we keep occupying our mind with little worldly things and puny worldly messages, we will shrink our capacity to behold the eternal glory of Jesus Christ, which is the antidote to all that ails us. What Jared Wilson's point here is this. The world that we stare at, the world that we look at, the world that we see is the world that we live in. If you want to go ahead and you want to live inside of a world that is catastrophic, that is almost always dying, that there is one big crisis after one big crisis, look at the news feed. I've been looking at the news feed. As somebody who's struggled with anxiety my whole life, let me tell you, that does not help my anxiety at all, right? You just keep scrolling through the news and it's like, 7.2 magnitude earthquake this morning. That's great. Love that vibe. And then you're going through and it's a shooting in Finland, right? Sweden. You just keep going through, right? And there's just all of these things all over the place and it all looks like the whole world is burning. And if that is what you see, if that's your lens to see the world through, the way that you interact with the world is going to be that it's all burning and it's all falling apart. And you become a super anxious person, right? Or if you want to go ahead and live inside of a small, tiny world, you just have to look at your phone and on your social media feeds, right? All of your friends are just a virtual throwaway, and you don't need to check in with your friends because you can just see what your friend's doing. Oh my gosh, they went on vacation to Bermuda. I feel like I went on vacation to Bermuda too. And then you go ahead and you start looking up the prices of vacation inside of Bermuda, and then you go ahead and start trying to see how you can finance it. Next thing you know, you've wasted 12 hours and you're like, waiting for 3 credit card checks, right? This is generally how it kind of works, right? You constantly keep comparing and seeing. And this, fundamentally, is the problem of how we view the world. The world that we see is the world that we live in. And what Jared Wilson's point is this: if you want to live inside of a world where you can trust that God is good, if you want to live inside of a world where you can trust that God is constantly working for the good of those who believe in him, then you have to behold the glory of God. You have to behold the glory of God. See, we did this experiment inside of youth group. And I asked them to go ahead and tell me what was on the face of a penny, face and tail, right? And they had to, by memory, try to recall all of the details that they could about a penny. And then I gave them a quarter. And I said, we're going to do the same thing again, but really study the quarter so that this time you'll be able to give a better answer. And that is the difference between seeing and beholding. See, seeing is what we glance at. Seeing is what we do on a daily basis. We just casually observe. But beholding, that is where you stop and you stare. You really ponder it, right? And that is why it's so important for us to do that with God. If you can behold God. See, here's the next quote from Jared Wilson. It says this: "We think we know what will do the job of making us holy. Doing the job of making us holy and seeking holiness is integral to discipleship. But more central to our discipleship is the news that actually makes Christianity Christianity. We are holy, not because what we have done, but because what Jesus has done. This is why the good news is so good. The essential message of Christianity isn't do, but done. The good news is news, not instructions, and it announces to us not get to work, but it is finished. And so it turns out that the direct route to God-honoring behavior is not born out of good behavior, it's born out of good beholding." And see, the problem with the church inside of Galatia is this. They had gotten really good at creating divisions inside of the church just based off of what they could see. I am a better Christian because I am circumcised, and therefore I'm a better Jew, and if I'm a better Jew, then Jesus was the best Jew, and if I'm supposed to be like Jesus, then I'm supposed to be like the best Jew, right? That's essentially what was happening, was that there was this division that was growing up inside of the church, and that is really fundamentally where the issue is. Listen to this, Galatians 5 and 6. "For we eagerly await the Spirit by faith, the hope of righteousness. In Jesus Christ, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision accomplishes anything. What matters is faith working through love." See, the thing that goes ahead and binds us together is the work that Jesus Christ did, and us being able to apply that to our lives through faith. And through faith, And to be able to apply it to our lives, we have to be able to love. Picking up the next thread. Well, actually, hold on. Next spot is Paul's anger, right? Inside of the spot, this is maybe the most strong language I've ever seen Paul use. It's a great spot to just kind of stop and ponder. And while we're reading this today, I just want you to go ahead and keep in mind that the reason that Paul is so venomous inside of this spot is because of what these Judaizers were trying to take from the church that he was starting, okay? So, Galatians 5, 7 through 12, you were running well. Who prevented you from being persuaded regarding the truth? This persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole batch of dough. I myself am persuaded in the Lord that you will not accept any other view, but whoever it is that is confusing you will pay the penalty. Now, brothers and sisters, if I preach circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In this case, the offense of the cross has been abolished. I wish those who were disturbing you might themselves be mutilated. See, inside of this spot, Paul is recognizing that this is not the work of a whole group. This is the work of a few key actors, right? And what's really coming over here is that it just takes a few people to go ahead and cause dissent. And to go ahead and illustrate this point, I'm just going to go ahead and say, when you've ever taken a long car ride, is there a person that you do not want to ride with because they are the delicate person? You can't drive too fast because then they get motion sick. You can't take the turns too sharply because then, oh my gosh, now they're dizzy, right? They have to stop at the bathroom every 2 hours, right? They didn't pack a lunch, so you have to go waste time inside of a drive-thru instead, right? This is how road trips go from 7 hours to 12 hours, right? I'm not speaking out of personal vengeance or anything. I'm just saying, y'all need to be focused while you're in the car, okay? You're there for one purpose, and that's to get to destination B. Anyway, we all know what it's like to drive with the delicate person inside of the car. And you'll know that it takes just one delicate person to go ahead and ruin the whole car trip because you're just constantly trying to appease the person who is not easy to appease. If you're the delicate person, I'm sorry that you had to hear the truth like this morning. I say it with love. I say it with love. And here's the other thing. Even a small deviation causes long-term consequences. See, if you're hiking a trail, right? And you're starting off, and you see two trails that go next to each other like this for a while, it could be easy to assume that they both go to the same location, but ultimately they don't, right? Even if something looks like it's starting off the same exact way, eventually the small deviation grows larger and larger and larger and larger. Or, I suppose a more proper example would be woodworking. There's a reason that my dad doesn't let me do anything with him inside of the wood shop anymore, and that is because you have to be precise when you're going ahead and measuring stuff to go ahead and fit into each other. And see, the thing is that even if you get like a 1/16 of an inch off, it can go ahead and it can mess with the whole fitting of the whole piece of wood, right? The thing is that even a small deviation, even something that seems like it's inconsequential, sorry, Dad, I didn't realize that I was looking at the wrong nubbins on the tape measure. Even that can cause a significant deviation in the long course of things. Matthew 18, 6 through 7 says this, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to fall away, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned into the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of the offenses. For offenses will inevitably come, but woe to the person by whom the offense comes." See, the really important thing here is this, that God cares how we treat each other. And God really cares, especially when it's inside of his church. Because inside of this space where we are all together, we are each other's society. We are each other's family. We are each other's group. Right? And inside of this space, or you look around, this is what God made to go ahead and replace what you gave up, the life that you used to live. It's here. And if you look around you today, these are all the people who are going on the same journey that you're going on. We're all heading on the slow, long road to the cross. And here's the thing. It just takes a little dissent to go ahead and start causing that whole warm, fuzzy feeling to dissipate. I am a conflict avoidant person, right? I do not like to go march up directly to a person and say, oh my gosh, the way that you chew loudly with your mouth open drives my whole spine upwards into myself and I want to die, right? I'm not the kind of person that's going to say that to a person. However, right, these are the things that I think quietly to myself. And then sometimes I think loudly next to somebody else. And then you start talking about that and somebody else starts talking about that. Next thing you know, you've created a whole little pocket of people who are just like super opposed to mouth-eating Joe. I'm sorry if your name's Joe. I was just going for it, okay? But see, the thing is, this is how it starts. It's something usually small, something usually inconsequential, and then you try to just vent for just a second. It's like, I need to get it off my back. I cannot stand the way, that, I don't know, somebody smells that day, right? And then you start talking about it, and then all of a sudden you've created a division where that person is no longer a part of the group, that person is outside of the group because you're all good-smelling people and that one person is the bad-smelling person, right? And the point that I'm trying to make is not that you all need to take better showers. The point that I'm trying to make is that it's really easy to go ahead and create divisions. It's much easier to create a division than it is to heal a division. So really, all of this leads on to the question that we need to ask, what have you been freed to do? If God gave you liberty, what have you been freed to do? Galatians 5:13 through 16 say this, for you were called to be free, brothers and sisters, only don't use this freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but to serve one another through love. For the whole law is fulfilled in one statement, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you will not be consumed by one another. I say then, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. See, here's the thing. We have been freed to love. We have been freed to love. We're not bound by the 613 Mosaic laws. We're not bound by all of the laws that we used to have. Christianity is one of the most free religions out there because we do not have to worry about a multitude of rules. We only have to worry about 2 rules. To love the Lord with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and all our strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. But the important part is that we choose to love. John 15:5 through 8 says this, I am the vine and you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I am him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me. If anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown aside like a branch and he withers. They will gather them, throw them into a fire, and they will all be burned. If you remain in me and in my words, you can ask for whatever you want and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you produce much fruit and prove to be my disciples. So the question is, how do you remain in Jesus? That's the next fill in the blank, Jesus. How do you remain in Jesus? John 15:9 through 10 says this, as the Father has loved me, I also loved you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and I remain in his love. I love this passage because it causes a lot of people to start panicking. Love this passage because it causes panic, right? Because the question is then all of a sudden, is God's love conditional? If you want to be loved by God, you have to follow all of Jesus' commandments. What is it that Jesus commands you to do to remain in his love? John 15:17 says this, this is what I command you. Love one another. If you want to remain in Jesus, if you want to stay connected to the vine, if you want to experience the life-giving fruit of the Spirit, what do? Love one another. See, Jesus calls us to love each other, and this is really the fundamental point. This is the fundamental purpose of church. It's a community where we all work together, working for the same goal of this. Now, you might be asking, if there's only 2 laws to Christianity, why then is there so many laws that are given inside of the epistles? Why are there so many laws that Jesus gives? That is because laws teach us the posture of obedience. Laws teach us the posture of obedience. See, the thing is, when you were a kid, you had a lot more rules placed on you than you do now. Do not eat sweets before dinner because you'll spoil your stomach, right? Or, you have to be back by 8 p.m. Here's the thing that I hope for you inside of this room, that you're all not living by the same rules that your parents put you under when you were 5, right? Because that would be awkward, right? As you have become older, you have had less rules that you need to follow because fundamentally you have learned the principle behind the rule and you don't need it to be enforced anymore. And the thing is, the older you get, the more generally free that you are because the better that you understand how you're supposed to act. Laws teach the posture of obedience. See, a while ago, I think it was my first year working here, I had realized that I had one of the worst horrible back hunches, right? And I was like, I'm going to go work this out. So I bought this back straightening thing, right? And essentially it's just like a mini backpack that was designed by people who hate you. And then you had to put it on and it just kind of constantly forces your shoulders back up like this. And it just, every time that you moved, it just pull you right back. And you'd do something and it would pull you right back. It was awful. I hated that thing with just the most wild vengeance. But the idea of it was that every time I deviated from what was the right posture, it would go ahead and it would re-straighten it back to the center point, which is why the epistles are so powerful. It's not because they're giving us universally applicable rules. What they're teaching us is a bunch of small rules that can be used to go ahead and teach the overall posture of obedience, of what it means practically to love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And here's the thing, Jesus calls us to love everybody in the world. We are called to love everybody in the world. But here's the thing, if you cannot love the people inside of your church who are all bound by the same grace, who are all bound by the same sacrificial love that Jesus gave them, if you can't love everybody inside of this room, how can you love everybody out there in the world? John 13:35 says this, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." See, Jesus was speaking that inside of a room just right after the Last Supper. He was not saying this to the world. He was not saying it globally. What he was saying is, they will know you are my disciples if you, the disciples, can love one another. Because inside of that space, if you can sacrificially serve each other inside of that space, it will grow and it will spread. But this is where it starts. This is how everybody knows that you are my disciple, how well you love each other. See, we have a rule inside of the youth group, and the rule is I should not be able to know just by looking at you if you're dating someone, right? It's a fundamental, it's an important rule, and the reason that we have this rule inside of the youth group is so that if anybody comes into the youth group and they are single and then they see a whole couch full of people who are all interlocked with their arms together and, they all look like they have just started dating, right? They're all still inside of that stage. It makes them feel super awkward. So just to go ahead and make sure that everybody feels as comfortable inside of the youth group space as possible, we have a rule, no PDA, just in general, right? But the thing is that inside of the church, we should kind of have the opposite rule. We should be so loving, we should be so welcoming, we should be so forgiving that when people come through the doors, it's immediately obvious that this space is different. That this space is different. So let's go ahead and start working through the application of this. What does this mean? At this point, also, I'm going to go ahead and release my teenagers to go and to help my poor wife as she is frantically preparing the rest of the details of the Super Bowl Sunday. So exciting. Thank you. I will pay you your $5 later. So anyway, the thing is, what does the application of this look like? The first point is this: we do not belong to the world, we belong to each other. We don't belong to the world, we belong to each other. This space, this room, this is who we are beholden to, right? Because the thing is, if we are the family of God, therefore we ought to act like a family. If we are inside of God's family, if we have all been adopted in as children, then we ought to act like we are a family. Sometimes that brings a lot of baggage. Sometimes y'all have dysfunctional families. Sometimes saying y'all need to act like a family brings up a lot of background problems for you. Or sometimes you're like, oh yeah, no, I love family, right? But see, here's the thing. Family is always messy. Family is always messy. It doesn't matter if you were raised inside of a family where it was like you had the most perfect mom and you had the most perfect dad and you had the most perfect situations. The outside world is still messy, and y'all are going to get messy when you come home, right? Y'all are going to bring the mess in when you come home. Or maybe your family is just inherently messy. In that space there with somebody that you just cannot deal with makes you really uncomfortable, right? Maybe you have an uncle who eats Thanksgiving with his mouth open. I'm sorry, mouth open eaters, I'm not coming after you today. This is just the first example that comes to mind. Or maybe, right, maybe you have somebody who, who's like a criminal inside of your family. You always feel kind of weird about inviting him in. Or maybe you've got, a very political person inside of your family, somebody who is either really right or really left. And you go sit in and they take every opportunity to let you know everything that Trump is doing, because both the left and the right let you know everything that Trump is doing. Because either they're happy or they're like crying, right? It's either extreme, right? But see, the thing is that family is always it's a messy space. Because everybody comes in with different things. But the thing is, that's what makes family so painful sometimes, is that you can't just be like, that's enough, Uncle Dave. I do not care anymore about the geopolitical border down south. I don't care anything about Mexico or what it's doing, and I don't care anything about the Gulf of America / Mexico. You're not invited to spaghetti dinner anymore. You can't come. You've said one too many tweets. You have made one too many comments. You're out, right? You can't say that to a family member. You can't say to somebody like I just keep going after uncles today. I need to go find a new target. You can't just say to your aunt who like deliberately ostracizes you, right? You can't just say to your aunt, I'm done. I'm not interested anymore, right? You always have to keep trying. You always have to keep working, because family has this expectation that even though it's hard, it's worth it, because you have to be beholden to each other. And that's the thing about church. It changes your relationship with God from an employee-employer relationship to a father-son relationship. Because if I was employed by my dad, I would have been fired by now, right? See, if I was employed by my dad, I would have been fired because my dad, love him very much. He's a great dad. He's just a hunter. I'm not. He is a very crafty woodsmith. I can't measure or remember details for love or money, right? My dad, NRA gun instructor. I can't shoot very well text at all, right? See, the thing is that in pretty much every single way that it is possible for me to be the opposite of my father, I pretty much stand the opposite of my father. And here's the great thing about it. He can't disown me. because I'm his son. If I was an employee, I would have been fired, but because I am his son, we're stuck together, and that's the point and the beauty of relationships. And that's the beauty of church. Next point on the list, our freedom should cleave us together, not cleave us apart. I did that because it's funny, because cleave means two opposite things. But here's the thing, right? Your freedom, the way that you express your Christian freedom, should drive you together, not push you apart. 1 Corinthians 8, 9 through 13 says this, "But be careful that this right of yours is in no way becomes a stumbling block for the weak. For if someone sees the one who has knowledge dining in an idol's temple, won't his weak conscience be encouraged to eat food offered to idols? So then the weak person, the brother or sister for whom Christ died, is ruined by your knowledge. Now when you sin like this against your brothers and sisters and wound their weak conscience, you are sinning against Christ. Therefore, if food causes my brother or sister to fall, I will never eat meat again." Strong words, Paul. "So I will not cause my brother or sister to fall." See, we have freedom. We can do whatever we want to as long as we can obey the two Christian laws. But as long as we, in our expression of freedom, don't do something that causes our brother or our sister to stumble. See, the important thing that Paul's picking up here inside of this passage is that if you feel like something is sin, it becomes sin. The mere idea that something is sinful or wrong for you to do, it becomes sin. For example, inside of this passage, what Paul was talking about was that it is not technically wrong to eat food offered to idols as long as you know that idols aren't real. If you're like, oh, they're wasting their time offering it to Zeus, therefore Zeus isn't real, therefore I'm just eating a great meat meal, right? But if you eat food and you're like, I feel weird about this because it was offered to Zeus, now that food has become sin to you. And here's the thing. One person can have that freedom and the other person can't, right? One person has that freedom, the other person hasn't found that freedom yet. Who are you to drive your brother or your sister to sin? Let's go ahead and pull it out to someplace else, maybe a little bit more understandable. Controversy within the last, my whole childhood. Harry Potter, right? The book series. Don't get me wrong. I may or may not have the whole book series memorized at this point. But the thing is, right, if me reading Harry Potter causes my brother or sister to stumble because they feel weird about the witchcraft inside of it, and then I say, oh, don't worry about it. Just read it. Just read it. Just read it. You'll love it. You'll love it. You'll love it. You'll love it. And then they read it, and then they feel still weird about it. I've caused them to sin. They've gained nothing through the process except knowing a great literary masterpiece. And then at the end, I've just driven my brother to sin, and my freedom has cost them their consciousness, right? And this is what I'm asking you to do, right? This is what's important. Our freedom that we're expressing, we're all free from a vast majority of laws so long as that our obedience to the two rules isn't jeopardized. And if you're doing something that causes your brother to sin, then you instantaneously start sinning because you're not loving your neighbor as yourself. Galatians 5:15, I'm re-emphasizing this because I thought it was really good. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you will not be consumed by one another. If you start trying to cause divisions, watch out because you will be cut out. See, we all know churches that are like that. We all know that inside of our heads. My grandpa, when I was working, before I was working, my grandpa gave me a dire warning. He said that there was this church that he used to work for, and it was a simple board meeting where they were going to go ahead and discuss the walls that they were going to paint the sanctuary. 15 minutes later, people were pointing and screaming at each other. Tables were getting upended. There was much crying at the end of it. And inside of that moment, a simple decision had suddenly become this huge division, right? And see, the thing is that we can all be better than that. So let's go over some reasons that we don't necessarily love somebody inside of this space. Let's go over some of the reasons that we typically don't do that. The first one is they're wrong, right? They're doing something that is wrong, and it bothers me endlessly, right? There's a lot of ones inside of this space, like maybe Pastor Greg not appreciating the true genius that is the water fountain, because it's a beautiful system, and let me tell you, we save so many water bottles. Okay, nobody cares. But anyway, here's the thing. You can feel 100% corrected that you are right and the other person is wrong, and you just want to go ahead and drive the point home how right you are. First off, first thing that you've done, you've immediately started sinning because you're not treating your neighbor as yourself, right? That instantaneous feeling of, I have to be vindicated and I have to prove how right I am, you're already on shaky ground. Number two, you could be wrong too. Your perspective could be wrong. From your point of view, from where you're standing at, you could be 100% sure that water bottles are a waste of space and that they're slowly killing our environment, and the BPA is just weird. I don't know how I feel about having forever chemicals inside of my body, right? That could be your space that you're standing in from your perspective. And then on the other side, it's just way easier to organize, and you don't want to have to spend $1,000 on 5 different water coolers because they come out so slow, right? See, the thing is, where you're standing at and where your perspective is changes things wildly. And you could be so sure that you're right, but from any other perspective, you're just as wrong as the next person. So, one reason you don't love everybody inside of the church as well as you should, they're wrong. Next one, they've wronged me. That's the harder one to forgive. It's not just as simple as stating, well, they're wrong about this concept, or they're wrong about this, or they're wrong about, they're wrong about Twitter, right? It's none of that, right? It's directly and personalized to you. I do not like that person at church because, gosh dang it, they did not vote for me last year at the Super Bowl Sunday, and I'm harboring a grudge against that for the rest of my days because you know what? That hot chocolate soup was delicious, and I can't believe I didn't rate higher. Sorry. Nobody even remembers what I made last year. Anyway, the point is this, right? Wally, you grieve me. You grieved me. Matthew 18:15-17 says this, if your brother or sister sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've won your brother. But if he won't listen to you, take 1 or 2 others with you so that the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses to every fact may be established. And if he doesn't pay attention to them, go tell the church. And if he doesn't pay attention to even the church, let him be like a Gentile and the tax collectors to you. Jesus' principle here is this. If you have a problem with somebody, start with the somebody. Don't start with the everybody else. If you have a problem with somebody inside of the church, or if you have a problem with just somebody inside of your immediate sphere, do not start going and telling every other person because it's not productive. It is the exact opposite, right? Say for example, you say, I cannot stand Joshua's preaching style. Every time he comes up on stage, I keep going, man, I wish I could develop a sudden bout of stomach illness, right? Every time he comes up, I'm scared, right? The thing is, what would be much better for the health of the church, much better for everybody, is if you had a problem with something that I was doing, just let me know. I can factor in whether or not I can make it happen, but I'm still young, I'm still trainable, I'm still trying to learn how to preach. I haven't hit that point yet, right? And the thing is that you could just go ahead and tell me directly and I could learn as compared to it being done in private and it causing divisions and people feeling more and more disgruntled. And then every time I get up, 5 people walk out and then all of a sudden it's just like a small protest. I'm not saying this has happened. I'm just coming up with a hypothetical scenario, okay? But here's the thing, right? Youth group's messy. Youth group left a space open. Youth group put a hole through the wall. If you have a problem with that, let me know, right? Here's the thing. It's so much easier for us to change if we get a chance to hear what we have done to offend somebody else. But if you find yourself having a hush conversation, you have yourself trying to speak quietly because you don't want somebody else to hear it about something that somebody else did to you, then inside of that moment, what you're doing is you're creating a division that is splitting the church further and further apart, not driving you guys closer and closer and closer together. See, the thing is that I had that happen not too terribly long ago inside of the youth group. And one of my small group leaders sent me this long text message, and inside of the text message, it was just like a couple of constructive criticisms for the youth group, and it was just really helpful to hear it from a different perspective as compared to them talking to like every other small group leader first, and then building up until it was a whole problem, right? I was able to hear it. I was able to take the lesson, and I was able to go ahead and fix the situation inside of the future. It was something that was really, really good, and I was really glad that it happened that way. And the last reason that we really have a hard time loving people inside of the church, and this one's the hard one. They're costing me. They're costing me. Right? Because you can have the person that's wrong, you can have the person that wronged you, but then you have the person that costs you, and you all know that person inside of your head. Don't point. But you know, every time they go up to have a conversation with you, you go, oh no. Right? I used to, at an old church, I was a small group leader, and I had a student. Every time he came up to me, I was like, oh no, this is going to be the whole rest of small group. He's just going to talk to me. And if I don't talk to him, he's going to get in a fist fight with another kid. I am held hostage by this kid. I have to keep him busy so he does not start fighting. But also, I have to make sure that I keep my own sense of sanity, because all he does is he just talks to me the entire time. We all know that one person that cost you, right? And see, here's the thing. Jesus made time for you even though you cost him everything. He left the splendor of heaven, the glories of heaven, the otherworldly riches in the glorious space where there was no sin, there was nothing wrong. He left that space, and he was born on earth not to the rich, but to the poor. Not just to the poor, but to the poorest of poor. He was born into absolute poverty for you. He left the glories of heaven for the squalors of earth. And here's the thing. He did that for you. So therefore, shouldn't you do that for others? Now, obviously, there are boundaries about it. You can't just keep giving out until all of a sudden you lose all of your patience and then you snap at the person, right? You need to set up personal boundaries where you can do it inside of a sustainable and healthy way. But the important part is that you try, right? So here's the thing. How Jesus dealt with it is really significant, right? Because Jesus had a whole ministry, and the entire time he was constantly surrounded by an entourage. He was constantly surrounded by people who needed things from him. He was constantly surrounded by people who were desperate for healing. He was constantly surrounded by people who were desperate to get rid of a demon inside of a loved one. He was just surrounded by needy people continuously. And what did Jesus do? He spent time with the Father. That was Jesus' method, right? And here's the thing that I think is really significant. He made time with just him and God. He didn't make time with him and his favorite things that he loves to do. It's not like Jesus went, oh my gosh, I can't heal one more person today. Y'all are a needy bunch. I need to go sit in the corner and crochet for a while. I have to go video game. Give me time. I need to read a book. No, Jesus didn't do any of that. What he did when he made time for himself, he spent it with God. And inside of that space, he found strength to do the rest of his ministry. And I think what we need to do is we need to pray for a soft heart so that we can be as approachable as Jesus. And here's the thing, what we'll find when we do that, and this leads into my last point, is your relationship with God will grow when you do what he does. Your relationship with God will grow when you do what he does. When you spend time doing something that somebody else wants to do, you can't help but grow closer to that person. For example, my wife loves thrifting. She's in a thrifting stage right now, right? She's seen so many people on her whatever social media platform she is. I'm off of it, thank the Lord. But anyway, whatever social media platform she's using, she sees a ton of people thrifting and going out to the store. I hate shopping, personally. It's the hill I have to die on every day. But the thing is, we went thrifting yesterday, and my wife had so much fun doing it. And what I discovered was that while I was doing what my wife wanted to do, we were both joined inside of that space together, and we were growing together as compared to growing apart, right? You all know what that's like when you go home and you sit next to your wife or your husband, and then you do something separately together. Y'all know that space, right? Where you both sit down and you're like, one's reading a book and the other one's like video gaming, because that's what I do all the time. But anyway, you know that space, what it's like, right? Where you do things together separately or separately together, right? And what you discover is that you really only grow closer with a person if you do what that person likes to do, if you really stretch out and you put yourself inside of somebody else's space, right? Like, I love hiking. My dad loves hiking. It's a great way for my dad and I to bond, not necessarily over discussing the disembowelment of a deer, but, you know, hiking is a spot that we can both mutually meet together. And inside of that moment, you know, we're able to grow and do things together. And what you will discover is that if you do what God does, if you care about the people that God cares about, if you go out into the world and you look for the needy, for the helpless, for the people who can't take care of themselves, and you forgive what is hard for you to forgive, well, you're doing all of these things, in essence, if you love, what you'll discover is that you and God grow closer. If you do the work of healing the world, you and God will grow closer than if you just spend personal time with God every morning, because you're doing what God loves to do, and God wants to share that space and that ministry with you. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we get to eat some delicious soup, or, you know, non-delicious soup, depending whether or not you're trying peanut butter and jelly ramen. It's a great time. Judge, you didn't hear that. You didn't hear that, Judge. Whoops, forgot she was here. Dear God, thank you so much for today. Thank you so much for this opportunity for us to come together and hear about you. And dear God, thank you so much for the blessing that you have given us. Dear God, I just ask that you be with us today, that you would be with us inside of our future, and that you would be with us as we go out inside of our neighborhoods, our communities. And dear God, I just ask that you be with us while we're here, that you would give us a soft heart that wants to spend time together, that you would drive us closer together than we would ever have been, and God, that we would be like a family to each other, that this would be a space that we would want to be, and that this is a space that we are proud to share. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Go get some soup, y'all. Oh, wait. Before you go, prices. I forgot to mention this at any other time. This is a fundraiser for my youth group. So